If Earth had massive rings like Saturn, everything would change forever. You'd never see sunrise the same way again. Sunlight would be torn apart by glowing bands of rock and ice, casting shadows over cities and creating places locked in permanent darkness. What you once thought was beautiful could become humanity's greatest threat. These rings would shatter the climate, destroy satellite networks, and plunge the world into an entirely different reality. Beautiful? Yes, but also a nightmare. You might be thinking, if Earth had rings like Saturn, the sky would be breathtaking, a view so beautiful, anyone would want to see it at least once in their lifetime. But have you ever wondered, what happens to sunlight when it's blocked by billions of massive chunks of ice and rock spinning around our planet? Have you ever imagined what would happen if half the Earth were locked in eternal darkness, while the other half burned with twice the usual heat? How would we survive when our satellites, GPS, internet, everything we rely on, are shattered by those so-called beautiful rings? And if you think that's the worst of it, you're wrong. Because those rings would trigger a devastating domino effect, so terrifying, even NASA would stay silent. Want to know why? Then we need to start at the very beginning. Everyone thinks Saturn's rings are a masterpiece of the cosmos, but in truth, they are the remains of a moon shattered by brutal gravitational forces. If Earth had rings, something must have been torn apart to create them. Maybe it was a massive asteroid slamming into the planet, or worse, the moon itself was destroyed. But if the moon disappears, you wouldn't recognize this planet anymore. Tides would collapse, Earth's rotation would spiral into chaos. A single day might stretch to 30 hours, while night would shrink to just a few. Light and darkness would no longer follow any pattern. Some regions would burn under the sun for hours on end. Others would freeze in darkness for days. Forests would die, ecosystems would collapse, and humanity would be next. But that's the easy part. Because the ring you see in the sky isn't some soft ribbon of glowing light. It's made of billions of chunks of rock, ice, and space debris, all spinning around the planet at tens of thousands of kilometers per hour. Anything that crosses their path, satellites, space stations, even the very technology we depend on to survive, would be obliterated instantly. No satellites means no GPS, no communication, no internet, no weather radar. We would live in a world blind to information, with no warning of what tomorrow might bring. And in that world, this beautiful, ringed Earth would become nothing more than a cosmic prison, where humanity is trapped in the shadow of its own innocent wish. Just imagine, what would our world look like after a planetary ring suddenly appeared? No satellites, no telecommunications. Humanity would be utterly blind to its own planet. Tsunamis, hurricanes, and earthquakes would strike without warning. There'd be no radar, no early alerts, no time to run. The night side of Earth, cut off from sunlight, would grow bitterly cold. Trees would wither, unable to photosynthesize. Crops would fail, entire regions would face famine. Meanwhile, places under constant sunlight would suffer a different fate. Endless heat waves would split the ground open. Cities would be scorched hour after hour, slowly turning to lifeless husks. But the real catastrophe wouldn't be the wrath of nature, it would be us. Modern society, built entirely upon the fragile web of technology, would collapse within days. No GPS, no internet, no banking, no global supply chains. Medical systems would fail, transportation would halt, chaos would erupt. The brilliant cities of today would descend into pitch-black labyrinths, silent, desperate, and violent. Would be thrown back to a primitive age, where knowledge is replaced by rumor and fear, where people are no longer shielded from nature, but at the mercy of it. And every passing day would feel like a step further away from civilization and deeper into survival. And above us would loom the ring. Not a soft ribbon of starlight, not a glowing halo of beauty, but a brutal wall of ice, dust, and rock. Billions of fragments hurtling around Earth at speeds of tens of thousands of kilometers per hour. A cosmic buzzsaw, tearing apart anything that enters its path. Every satellite, every space station, every tool humanity once used to connect, to learn, to thrive, gone in seconds. No satellites means no eyes in the sky, no warnings, no help, just darkness. You think you'd survive in a world like that? Where your only source of light becomes a haunting reminder that the most beautiful things we dream of can become the very noose we hang ourselves with. The Earth ring, a wonder once imagined, now a sentence humanity can never escape. But it doesn't end there, because that ring will change the fate of our species in ways no one can predict. If such a ring truly existed, humanity would face only two options: adapt or go extinct. But if you think we could simply adapt, you've underestimated the cruelty of nature. Cities once flooded with sunlight would sink into permanent darkness. To survive, we'd be forced to create an entirely artificial light ecosystem. Massive orbital mirrors to reflect sunlight back down to Earth, plasma shields surrounding cities to block the constant drizzle of micrometeorites from the ring, and machines to regulate weather, light, and energy operating endlessly just to maintain the bare minimum for life. But the real cost wouldn't be technology. The real cost would be freedom. Every step forward in survival would be a step back from what it means to be human. We'd live inside vast glass domes bound to artificial cycles of light and time, controlled by synthetic satellites, and haunted by the fear that if one system fails, everything collapses. Earth, once a symbol of freedom and life, would become a rotating prison beneath the shadow of rings we can never break. We would no longer be the masters of this planet, but inmates of a system born from imagination that went too far. And that ring, once a beautiful dream found in science fiction, would become a death sentence, hanging silently above all of humanity. No second chances, no turning back. Only one question remains: what will you do when the sky no longer belongs to us? We've always dreamed of a more beautiful Earth, a more majestic one, with glowing rings across the sky like Saturn. But the universe is never beautiful in the way we wish it to be. Every streak of light up there is a scar, a trace of ancient collisions, of destruction so massive it could erase entire worlds. If Earth ever had rings, they wouldn't be a miracle. They would be a warning, a sign that the fragile balance sustaining life has been broken. We survived, not because Earth is perfect, but because it sits on a razor's edge between danger and safety. Just hostile enough to force us to evolve, but just gentle enough to let us survive. But what happens when that balance disappears? What if one day, the moon, Earth's silent guardian, suddenly vanished from the sky? What do you think would happen? Leave a comment. Do you have the courage to live in a world like that? And if you're ready, I'll see you in the next video.